Once upon a time, there was a sweet little girl who was loved by everyone who met her, but most of all, her grandmother, who adored her. She had a special cloak with a red hood that her grandmother made for her. It fit her so perfectly that everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother called her to the kitchen where she was preparing a basket of goodies. "Take this basket to your grandmother's house," she said. "She is ill and needs some food and medicine. Be careful on your way and don't stray from the path." Little Red Riding Hood eagerly accepted the task, feeling proud to help her grandmother. "I will be very careful, Mama," she promised, her voice full of confidence. Her mother warned her again, "Remember, stay on the path and do not talk to strangers." Little Red Riding Hood nodded and waved goodbye, excited to go. She set off down once, the winding forest path, the soft breeze of the woods carrying the scent of pine trees and flowers. The sun was shining brightly through the trees, and the birds sang cheerfully in the distance. She marveled at the beauty around her, the dappled light on the forest floor, the colorful flowers growing at the edge of the path, and the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. As Little Red Riding Hood skipped along, her thoughts were only on the good deeds she was about to do. She could already picture her grandmother's warm smile when she arrived at the cottage. She didn't notice the dark shadows creeping in between the trees, nor the silent movement of the wind. She was too wrapped up in her own excitement. Suddenly, a rustling sound caught her attention. She turned and saw a wolf standing just off the path. He was tall and sleek, with dark fur and sharp eyes that glinted in the sunlight. The wolf looked at her with a sly smile, his ears twitching as if he were listening carefully to every sound. "Where are you going, little girl?" the wolf asked, his voice smooth and friendly. He sounded kind, but there was an underlying hint of something dark in his tone. Little Red Riding Hood hesitated for a moment, but then she remembered her mother's warning. She stood tall and replied, "I'm going to my grandmother's house to take her some food and medicine. She is sick, and I want to help her." The wolf's eyes gleamed, and he leaned in closer, his voice lowering. "How lovely of you, little one. And where does your grandmother live?" "She lives at the end of the path," Little Red Riding Hood said, pointing to the winding trail ahead of her. "It's a small cottage in the woods, just beyond the big oak tree." The wolf thought for a moment, his mind already working quickly. "What a lovely grandmother you have," he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "But wouldn't it be a shame if you didn't stop to admire the flowers or take a look at the beautiful things in the forest? Your grandmother can wait a little longer." Little Red Riding Hood felt a moment of uncertainty, but she was a curious girl, and the forest was so full of life. The wolf's words seemed harmless, and she did enjoy looking at flowers. "Well, I suppose a short detour wouldn't hurt," she said. "I will pick some flowers for grandmother." The wolf gave a sly grin as she turned off the path. Little Red Riding Hood moved into the woods, her eyes focused on the vibrant colors of the flowers that surrounded her. She picked a bouquet of wildflowers, bending down to gather the most beautiful ones she could find. Meanwhile, the wolf took the opportunity to slip back onto the path and hurry toward the grandmother's cottage, his footsteps quick and silent. As Little Red Riding Hood continued her journey through the woods, her thoughts were filled with the beauty of the flowers she had gathered. The forest was a place of wonder for her, with its tall trees swaying gently in the breeze and the soft rustle of leaves underfoot. She was so absorbed in the task at hand, picking the most perfect flowers for her grandmother, that she didn't notice the time passing. She didn't hear the distant howl of the wind or the crack of branches underfoot as the wolf made his way swiftly toward the cottage. The wolf, meanwhile, was moving with purpose, his long legs stretching quickly over the forest floor. He was silent, blending into the shadows of the trees. His eyes were fixed on the cottage, and his mind was already planning his next move. He knew the old woman would be alone, and he was eager to take advantage of the opportunity. When he finally reached the cottage, the wolf stood for a moment, considering the scene before him. It was a small, quaint house with a thatched roof and flowers blooming around the windows. The smell of freshly baked bread and the faint scent of herbs floated in the air, making the wolf's mouth water. He had been anticipating this moment for some time, and now that he was here, he couldn't wait to carry out his plan. He padded up to the door, which was slightly ajar, and knocked gently. There was no response, so he knocked again, this time louder. Moments later, a weak voice from inside called out, "Who's there?" "Why, it's me, your granddaughter, Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf said in a high-pitched, sweet voice, trying to mimic the tone of the girl he had met on the path. "Oh, how nice of you to visit, my dear," came the response from inside the house. The old woman was lying in bed, feeling weak and feverish, but the sound of her granddaughter's voice made her smile. She was so happy to know that the girl had safely made her way through the woods. The wolf grinned slyly to himself, knowing that his deception had worked. He waited a moment, then in his deepest voice said, "Grandmother, I have brought you some fresh food and warm blankets." "How thoughtful of you, my dear," said the grandmother, her voice soft with gratitude. "Please, come in." With that, the wolf pushed open the door and entered the small, dimly lit room. The old woman was lying in her bed, her thin frame hidden beneath a heavy quilt. The wolf could see that she was frail and ill, and a sense of satisfaction washed over him. This would be even easier than he had thought. "Come closer, my dear," the grandmother said, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "I want to see you better." The wolf crept toward the bed, his heart pounding in his chest. His steps were slow and deliberate, each one bringing him closer to his prey. As he reached the edge of the bed, he paused for a moment, watching the grandmother, who seemed so trusting and unaware of the danger looming in the room. "Grandmother," the wolf said, trying to soften his voice, "you seem to be feeling unwell. I brought you a special surprise. Would you like to see it?" The old woman smiled faintly, her eyes half closed in fatigue. "I would love to, my dear," she murmured, though she could hardly keep her eyes open. "You are so kind." At this, the wolf's grin widened, and he swiftly moved to the bed. In one swift motion, he lunged toward the old woman, his sharp teeth bared, his claws reaching out to grab her. The grandmother gasped in shock, her frail body trembling with fear. She had no time to scream before the wolf struck, overpowering her with his strength. But just as the wolf was about to finish his grim task, there was a loud noise from outside, a sound of footsteps crunching through the snow. The wolf froze. For a moment, his ears pricking up as he heard the approach of someone on the path. It was Little Red Riding Hood, returning from the woods with her bouquet of flowers, completely unaware of the danger her grandmother was in. The wolf hesitated. If he didn't act quickly, the girl might arrive and ruin his plan. With a swift motion, he pulled the bed covers over the grandmother's body and hid her beneath the blankets. Then, with a final glance toward the door, he quickly darted in too, the shadows concealing himself in the corner of the room, waiting for the girl to arrive. Little Red Riding Hood unaware of the looming danger, skipped merrily along the path, clutching the bouquet of flowers she had picked for her grandmother. Her footsteps were light, the rhythm of her walk in sync with the rustling leaves overhead. She couldn't wait to reach her grandmother's cottage and bring her the surprise she had prepared. The afternoon sun shone through the trees, casting playful shadows on the ground. As she approached the cottage, Little Red Riding Hood felt a strange stillness in the air. The birds had stopped chirping, and the usual sounds of the forest seemed to have faded away. A cool breeze stirred the leaves, but there was no laughter in the air. For a moment, she hesitated, sensing that something was not quite right. She pushed the feeling aside, telling herself that it was simply her imagination. "Grandmother, I'm here!" she called out cheerfully as she approached the door. She reached for the doorknob, but to her surprise, it opened easily under her touch. It was slightly ajar, as though someone had already entered. Little Red Riding Hood felt a twinge of unease, but she dismissed it. Her grandmother was old and could have forgotten to shut the door properly. "Grandmother?" she called out again, stepping into the dimly lit cottage. The room was quiet, the only sound the creaking of the wooden floorboards beneath her feet. She glanced around, her eyes falling on the bed where her grandmother usually rested. But what she saw made her stop dead in her tracks. The bed was oddly still. The quilt, usually neatly tucked in, was thrown messily over the top. The figure, lying beneath the covers, seemed larger and more imposing than usual. Little Red Riding Hood's heart raced as she noticed the peculiar shape of the lump beneath the blankets. It didn't look like her grandmother at all. "Grandmother?" she asked again, her voice trembling slightly. "Come closer, my dear," came a faint, raspy voice from beneath the covers. It sounded strange, different from the usual warm and welcoming tone of her grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood stepped cautiously forward, her eyes narrowing in confusion. There was something not right about the voice. It was too deep, too hoarse. And as she got closer, she saw something even stranger. Her grandmother's voice seemed to be coming from under the covers, but the figure she could make out looked oddly larger. "Grandmother, what big ears you have!" Little Red Riding Hood exclaimed, her words spilling out without thinking. She had been taught to notice oddities, and now she couldn't ignore them any longer. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," the wolf replied, his voice still strained, though he tried to keep it soft and comforting. Little Red Riding Hood took another step closer. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have!" she said, feeling an unsettling chill run down her spine. The eyes peeking out from beneath the quilt were unnaturally large, their pupils dilated in a way that seemed unnatural for a frail old woman. "All the better to see you with, my dear," the wolf said, his voice smoother now, but with an undertone of something darker, more menacing. Little Red Riding Hood felt a knot of fear tighten in her stomach, but she couldn't bring herself to turn away. She was too close now to simply leave. As she stepped closer to the bed, she noticed something else, something that made her pulse quicken with fear. "Grandmother," she said, her voice trembling, "what big teeth you have!" "All the better to eat you with, my dear," the wolf snarled suddenly, leaping from the bed with terrifying speed. Little Red Riding Hood barely had time to react before the wolf was upon her. His claws reached out to grab her, his sharp teeth bared, ready to devour her. She screamed, the sound echoing in the small room, but it was too late. The wolf had already pounced, but just as he lunged, the door to the cottage burst open, and in rushed a woodcutter who had been passing by. Hearing the commotion, he had rushed to the cottage suspecting that something was wrong. With a mighty swing of his axe, he struck at the wolf, knocking him back and causing the beast to yelp in pain. Little Red Riding Hood, in a daze, scrambled to her feet and backed away from the wolf. She was terrified, her heart racing as she watched the struggle between the wolf and the woodcutter unfold. The wolf, now badly wounded, tried to escape, but the woodcutter's strength was too much for him. With one final blow, the wolf fell. To the ground, defeated. The woodcutter turned to Little Red Riding Hood, his face a mixture of concern and relief. "Are you all right, child?" he asked gently. Little Red Riding Hood, still in shock, nodded slowly. I think so," she said, her voice shaky. "I didn't realize it was the wolf." The woodcutter smiled reassuringly. "It's all over now, little one. The wolf won't harm anyone again." He turned to the bed and, with a few quick motions, pulled back the covers to reveal the grandmother, who had been hidden under the quilt. She was weak but unharmed, her eyes wide with relief. "Oh, thank you, kind woodcutter," she said, her voice soft but full of gratitude. Little Red Riding Hood ran to her grandmother's side, wrapping her in a tight hug. "Grandmother, you're safe!" she cried, her eyes filling with tears of joy. "Thanks to this brave man," the grandmother replied, smiling. At the woodcutter, the room was filled with a sense of calm after the chaos had passed. The woodcutter stood near the door, his axe in hand, breathing heavily from the struggle. Little Red Riding Hood, still in shock, clung to her grandmother, her small frame trembling with relief. The grandmother, now safe, stroked her granddaughter's hair gently, trying to soothe her fears. "My dear, you were so brave," the grandmother said softly, her voice warm and comforting. "But you must always remember your mother's warning. Never stray from the path, and never speak to strangers." Little Red Riding Hood nodded solemnly, her mind still reeling from the events that had unfolded. I didn't know it was the wolf. He tricked me." "That's the way of wolves," the woodcutter said, his voice firm. "They deceive and prey on the innocent. But you're safe now, and that's what matters." The grandmother gave a sigh of relief, grateful for the woodcutter's intervention. "Thank you, kind man, for saving us. I don't know what we would have done without you." The woodcutter nodded modestly, his face softening. "It was nothing. I was just passing by when I heard the commotion. You're both lucky I was close." Little Red Riding Hood looked up at him, her eyes still wide with gratitude. "You saved us," she said simply. "Thank you." The woodcutter smiled and gave a small bow. "It's my duty. Now both of you need to rest. That's what's most important." With the immediate danger gone, the woodcutter left the cottage, giving one last look to Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother before he disappeared into the woods. The air was much quieter now, the forest returning to its peaceful state, and the sun slowly began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the landscape. Inside the cottage, the grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood sat together by the fire. The old woman wrapped her arms around the girl, pulling her close. "I'm so glad you're safe, dear," she said, her voice tender. "But promise me you'll always be careful when you walk through the woods." "I promise, grandmother," Little Red Riding Hood whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll never stray from the path again." They sat in silence for a while, the crackling of the fire the only sound in the room. Little Red Riding Hood couldn't help but think about the strange events of the day. The wolf, his deception, and how close she had come to danger. She shuddered at the thought, but her grandmother's comforting presence made her feel safe again. As the night fell, they ate the food Little Red Riding Hood had brought, and the grandmother told stories of the past, of times when the forest had been a place of mystery and magic. The stories filled the cottage with warmth, laughter, and a sense of peace that had been missing for much too long. Before long, Little Red Riding Hood's eyes began to droop, her body tired from the long journey through the woods. Her grandmother tucked her into bed, pulling the warm blankets up around her shoulders. "Sleep well, my dear," she whispered, brushing a lock of hair from Little Red Riding Hood's forehead. "I will, grandmother," the little girl replied softly, a smile on her lips as she closed her eyes. As she drifted off to sleep, Little Red Riding Hood made a vow to herself. She would always remember her mother's warnings and the lesson she had learned that day. No matter how beautiful the forest seemed, or how sweet the temptation to wander off the path, she would never again stray into danger, and from that day forward, Little Red Riding Hood stayed on the path whenever she visited her grandmother. Never speaking to strangers and always being careful, knowing that some dangers were hidden behind the kindest faces.
Thank you for joining us on this magical adventure. If you're looking for a safe and peaceful way to entertain your little one, and you've enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a relaxing bedtime story every week. Sweet dreams, and see you in the next story.
I am Emma, and now I will take you on a magical journey into the classic fairy tale of Beauty and the Beast. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to click the like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new tale. Now snuggle up, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there lived a rich merchant who had 3 daughters. The youngest and most beautiful of them all was named Belle. She was kind-hearted, modest, and loved to read books, unlike her 2 older sisters, who were vain and selfish. They always focused on outward beauty and material things, while Belle found her joy in simple pleasures. One day, the merchant's fortune turned, and his ships, which were bringing goods from faraway lands, were lost in a terrible storm. As a result, he lost all his wealth and was forced to move with his daughters to a small cottage in the countryside. Though Belle's sisters complained about their modest new life, Belle, ever the optimistic one, accepted their circumstances with grace and kindness. She would often wander in the woods nearby, reading books and enjoying the peaceful solitude of nature. One winter's day, the merchant received news that one of his ships, which had been thought lost, had returned to port. He decided to set out on a journey to reclaim some of his lost wealth. Before leaving, he asked his daughters what they would like him to bring back for them. Belle, being humble, asked only for a single rose, as she had heard that roses were rare during the winter. Her 2 sisters, on the other hand, demanded expensive gifts, such as fine dresses and jewelry. With the gifts in hand, the merchant set out on his long journey. He traveled through forests and over mountains, but as he neared his home, a fierce snowstorm set in. His path became treacherous, and he lost his way. After hours of wandering, he finally stumbled upon a magnificent castle hidden deep in the woods. Exhausted and cold, he approached the castle, hoping to find shelter for the night. To his surprise, the castle gates opened on their own, and he stepped inside. The warmth of the hearth and the luxurious surroundings immediately made him feel at ease. A voice echoed through the halls, inviting him in. The merchant followed the sound and found himself in a grand dining room where food was laid out on a long table ready for him to enjoy. Though the feast was delicious, no one was in sight. After he had eaten, the merchant stayed the night in the castle. The next morning, after the storm had passed, he woke up and looked out the window. He saw the beautiful roses blooming outside. He went into the garden, and as he picked one for Belle, he heard a growl behind him. "What do you think you are doing?" Turning around, the merchant was startled to see a fearsome creature standing before him. The creature was tall and massive, with the face of a beast and eyes that glowed with fury. He had the body of a man but was covered in fur, and his sharp claws seemed ready to strike. Trembling with fear, the merchant quickly placed the rose in his hands and said, "I didn't mean any harm, I swear. I only took the rose for my daughter, Belle. She loves roses, and I promised her I would bring one back. Please understand. I didn't intend to cause any disrespect." The beast's growl intensified, his eyes narrowing in anger. "You think you can simply take what belongs to me without consequences?" he roared. "Taking the rose has sealed your fate. You will either die for this crime, or you will remain my prisoner in this castle forever." The merchant fell to his knees, his voice desperate as he pleaded, "Please, I beg you. I am a poor man with nothing to offer. I only took the rose because it was a gift for my daughter. I have nothing else to give her." His eyes filled with sorrow. "I never intended to upset you. I only wanted to see her happy." The beast stood silent for a moment, staring at the merchant, his rage slowly fading as he considered his words. Finally, he spoke in a low, gruff voice. "I see the sincerity in your eyes, old man, but your crime cannot go unpunished. However, I will offer you a choice." He paused, his gaze heavy. "You may leave the castle, but you must send one of your daughters to take your place. Only then will your life be spared." The merchant was horrified. "No, I cannot do that. I cannot ask my daughter to pay for my mistake." But the beast's face remained unmoved. His decision was final. With no choice, the merchant reluctantly agreed, and after returning home, he explained the situation to his daughters. The older sisters, though initially saddened, were more concerned with the loss of their father's wealth and began to think of themselves. But Belle, who loved her father dearly, volunteered to go to the beast's castle, despite the great danger it posed. After much thought, and with a heart full of both fear and bravery, Belle knew what she had to do. She packed a small bag and went to each of her sisters. She kissed them both gently on the cheek, whispering her goodbyes, though they seemed more concerned with their own thoughts than with her safety. Then she turned to her father, wrapped her arms around him, and gave him a tender hug, promising him she would return as soon as she could. With a heavy heart, she stepped outside. The world seemed to hold its breath as she walked through the familiar grounds of their home for the last time. The air was still, and the forest that lay ahead seemed darker and more mysterious than ever before. With each step, Bella's heart was racing, but the thought of her father and her desire to save him gave her the strength to keep going. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and more entwined, casting long shadows along the path. The sky above darkened with heavy clouds, and a chill filled the air. Eventually, after what felt like a long journey, the towering gates of the beast's castle came into view. Though she was filled with dread, Belle gathered her courage and passed through the gates, stepping into the unknown. When Belle arrived at the castle, the beast greeted her with a mixture of coldness and gruffness. He told her she would be treated kindly, but she must remain in the castle forever. However, she was free to explore the castle and enjoy its many wonders. She wandered into a grand dining room where an enormous chandelier hung from the ceiling, shimmering in the light. But what caught her attention most were the many enchanted objects around the castle. A tall grandfather clock stood in the corner, its carved face wise and kind, with deep, soulful eyes. Near the fireplace, a candelabra flickered with soft light, the arms swaying slightly as if alive. She could have sworn she saw a playful wink from one of the candlesticks, which brought a smile to her face. Belle moved through the rooms, taking in the strange yet enchanting sights. A teapot with a gentle face painted on it stood proudly on a table, surrounded by fine china. Nearby, a small set of cups and saucers had delicate faces of their own, as if they were all quietly watching her, waiting for her to make the next move. Belle marveled at the lively energy of the items and felt a growing sense of wonder. Though Belle was initially frightened by the beast's look, she soon realized that he was not as frightening as he seemed. He treated her with respect and gave her everything she needed. As the days passed, Belle began to see the beast in a different light. Though his appearance was terrifying, he was kind and gentle. He would often ask her to join him for dinner, though he never insisted on anything. Belle's fear began to subside, and she found herself enjoying the time she spent with him. The beast, noticing her fascination, approached and spoke gently. "I see you enjoy reading, Belle. I have something I would like to show you." With a small nod, he opened a large wooden door, and Belle followed him inside. There, in front of her, was an enormous library. Shelves stretched all the way to the ceiling, filled with countless books on every subject imaginable. Belle's eyes widened in awe as she stepped further into the room, running her fingers over the spines of books. The scent of old paper and leather filled the air, and Belle could hardly believe her luck. "This library is for you," the beast said, his voice softening. "You are welcome to read any book you wish, whenever you wish." Belle could hardly believe her ears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. As she continued to explore the library, the beast added, "There is one room, however, that I must ask you never to enter." Belle turned to him, curious. "One room?" The beast's expression grew serious. "Yes, the rest of the castle is yours to explore, but that room is forbidden. Do not enter it, no matter what." Belle nodded, though her curiosity began to grow. She couldn't help but wonder what was hidden behind the door to the forbidden room. The days passed, and Belle spent many hours in the library, lost in the world of books. But the mystery of the forbidden room stayed with her. One day, when the beast wasn't near, her curiosity got the better of her. She found the door to the unallowed room, just as the beast had warned her about. It was locked, but Belle, filled with determination, managed to open it. Inside, she saw a single rose under a glass dome, glowing softly in the dim light. The petals were delicate, and one by one they seemed to fall. Belle stepped forward, mesmerized by the beauty of the rose. As she reached out to touch it, she noticed the petals trembling. Just as her fingers brushed the glass, one of the petals fell with a soft thud. At that moment, she heard footsteps approaching quickly. The beast burst into the room, his face filled with rage. "What have you done?" he growled, his voice trembling with anger. "You were not supposed to touch it." Belle stepped back, her heart racing. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to." The beast turned away, his large form shadowing the room, and left in a huff. Belle stood there, feeling a heavy weight on her chest as the last petal of the rose fell to the ground. Time passed, and despite her growing fondness for the beast, Belle often felt lonely in the grand, empty castle. One evening, the beast saw her sorrow and offered her a gift, a magical mirror that would allow her to see anything she wished, even those she left behind. Belle used the mirror to check on her father, and she saw that he was ill and in great distress. Belle's heart ached, and she begged the beast to let her return home to care for her father. The beast, though deeply sad to see her go, allowed her to leave on one condition, that she would return within 7 days. If she did not return, he would die of a broken heart. Belle promised to return and left the castle to care for her father. While she was home, her father's health improved, and she spent her days nursing him back to health. But as the 7th day approached, Belle's sisters were saddened that she had to return to the beast. They didn't want her to leave and secretly hoped she would stay with them forever. They tampered with the clock, setting it back by several hours, hoping that Belle would miss her return and be unable to fulfill her promise, keeping her with them for good. Yet, as midnight neared, Belle felt an unshakable sense of dread. Something was wrong. She could feel it deep in her heart. Overcome with worry, she realized she could not stay any longer. She rushed to the magic mirror and, to her horror, saw the beast lying motionless in the garden, his body covered in snow. Terrified, she wasted no more time. She raced back to the castle, praying she would not be too late. When she arrived, she found the beast in the same spot, barely alive. She ran to him and, with tears in her eyes, confessed her love for him. "I love you," she whispered. "I have always loved you, even when I was afraid." As soon as she spoke those words, the spell that had turned the beast into a monster was broken. There was a blinding flash of light, and before Belle's eyes, the terrifying creature before her began to change. His fur faded, his claws retracted, and his face softened into that of a handsome prince. Belle gasped in disbelief, staring at him in wonder. As the spell broke, not only did the beast transform back into the handsome prince, but the entire castle seemed to come alive with magic. The enchantment that had held the castle and its inhabitants in its grasp for so long was finally lifted. All around the castle, the objects that had once been people began to shift and change. The elegant candelabras that had served as the prince's former staff slowly began to take human form again. The butler, once a tall candle holder, now stood before Belle and the prince, his eyes gleaming with gratitude as he bowed deeply. The clock, who had been a grumpy timepiece, transformed back into a kindly, elderly man, his face wrinkled with age but full of joy. The tea set, which had once spoken in delicate, polite voices, now became a woman with a kind smile, wearing a soft apron. Each of them stood in the grand hall, now free from their magical restraints, looking both bewildered and overjoyed. It was as though they had all woken from a long, deep sleep, and they were filled with a profound sense of relief and happiness. The prince, now standing beside Belle, turned to them all with a broad smile. "You are all free," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for your patience, your loyalty, and your love. We will start anew, together." The once enchanted servants, now fully human again, rejoiced and embraced one another. The castle itself seemed to rejoice with them, its walls glowing with warmth and life. The curse had been broken, not only for the prince, but for everyone who had been touched by its dark magic. The beast, now a prince, looked at her with a gentle smile, and for the first time, his eyes were filled with warmth instead of sorrow. The prince took a deep breath and began to speak. "I was cursed by an evil sorceress," he said. His voice was rich and full of emotion. "For my arrogance, my cruelty, I was transformed into this monster. The curse could only be broken when someone saw past my appearance, someone who could love me despite my monstrous form. You, Belle, you loved me for who I am, not for what I looked like. Your love has set me free." Belle's heart swelled with joy, and a wave of relief washed over her. She realized that everything she had done, every moment of kindness she had shown the beast, had led to this magical moment. It wasn't just the curse that had been lifted. It was the love they had shared, even in the darkest of times. The prince took her hand, and they stood together in the enchanted garden, surrounded by the beauty of nature that had returned to life with the breaking of the curse. The once dark and dreary castle now shone with golden light, and the flowers seemed to bloom brighter than ever before. In time, they were married in a grand ceremony, a celebration that echoed throughout the kingdom. The castle was filled with joy and music as the prince and Belle exchanged vows, their hearts intertwined forever. The people rejoiced, for the Ajars, once feared beast, had been transformed not just by magic, but by love, a love that transcended all boundaries. Belle and the prince ruled the kingdom with kindness and wisdom, and their days were filled with laughter, happiness, and compassion. They knew that true beauty was not something that could be seen with the eyes, but something that lived in the heart. They never again worried about outward appearances, for they understood that love, kindness, and inner beauty were the truest treasures of all, and so they lived happily ever after, in the magnificent castle, surrounded by love and joy, knowing that their bond could never be broken.
The Moonlight Firefly. Deep in the heart of an ancient forest, where trees towered majestically into the sky and the leaves whispered stories to the wind, lived a little firefly named Lumi. From the day she hatched from her tiny cocoon, Lumi knew. She was different. While the other fireflies shimmered with a soft golden light in the night's darkness, Lumi's little light never seemed to glow. She loved watching the dance of the fireflies around the lake. How their lights reflected off the water like thousands of tiny stars, but she never joined in. She was afraid the others would notice her darkness. With every passing night, Lumi felt more and more alone. She tried to light up herself, squeezing her little eyes shut, flapping her wings with all her might, even concentrating so hard that sometimes she would feel dizzy. But nothing changed. One night, when the sky was especially clear, and the moon gazed down upon the lake like a giant silver eye, Lumi decided she wouldn't hide anymore. If she couldn't find light inside herself, she would look for it elsewhere. Taking a deep breath, she stretched her delicate wings and took off. The cool night air wrapped around her like a gentle embrace as she ascended toward the tallest branches of the trees. a place where the other fireflies rarely ventured. The forest looked different from above, mysterious, endless, and full of life. In the distance, she could hear the rhythmic song of the crickets, and somewhere below, a nightbird flapped its mighty wings, sending a soft rustle through the leaves as she fluttered through the darkness. Her eyes caught something glistening in the moonlight. A delicate spiderweb woven between two slender branches, adorned with tiny dewdrops. They sparkled like diamonds, reflecting the silver glow of the night. What if I take one of these drops and use it as my light? Lumi thought, her heart pounding with hope. She carefully hovered near the web and reached out with her tiny legs. But the moment she touched one of the shimmering droplets, it trembled and fell, vanishing into the shadows below. One by one, the rest of the droplets followed, leaving the web bare and empty. A cold wave of disappointment washed over her. And in that moment, Lumi realized that light cannot be borrowed. Feeling discouraged but not yet ready to give up, Lumi continued her journey, deeper into the forest. The further she went, the denser the trees became, their branches weaving together like a great canopy. Strange sounds echoed around her. Rustling leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the whisper of a soft breeze that carried the scent of damp earth and wildflowers. She had heard stories of Sovina, the ancient owl who lived in the great hollow tree at the heart of the forest. It was said that she had seen every star in the sky and knew all the secrets of the night. Lumi finally arrived at the massive tree, its gnarled bark glowing faintly under the moonlight. Gathering her courage, she peeked into the hollow where Sovina rested, her large golden eyes gleaming like twin suns. Taking a deep breath, Lumi spoke, her voice small but determined. "Great Sovina, I have come seeking your wisdom. I am different from the other fireflies. I have no light of my own. I have searched for it everywhere, but I cannot find it. Please tell me, how can I shine like the others?" The owl regarded Lumi with quiet curiosity before speaking in a voice as deep as the night sky. "Why do you seek light elsewhere, little one?" Lumi hesitated, then said, "Because I have none of my own." Sovina was silent for a moment, her gaze piercing through the darkness of Lumi's doubt. Then she spoke again. "Sometimes light does not come from outside. It comes from within." Lumi wasn't sure what the wise owl meant, but something about her words stirred something deep inside her. Still, uncertainty clung to her wings as she turned to leave. As Lumi hovered at the edge of the hollow, Sovina's voice called after her. "If you wish to understand true light, look beyond the treetops." The moon has watched over the night for ages. Perhaps it holds the answer you seek. Lumi turned her gaze upward. The moon. It had always shone so brilliantly, so effortlessly. Could it really hold the answer? For a moment, doubt flickered within her. But then, as she watched its soft glow bathe the forest in silver light, something inside her shifted. She had spent so long searching in the shadows. Perhaps it was time to rise above them. With newfound resolve, she set off toward the sky. That night, Lumi didn't return to the grass where she usually hid. Instead, she kept flying, higher, higher, past the thick embrace of the trees, past the whispers of the wind, until she emerged into the open sky. The moon hung above her, vast and luminous, painting the world below in silver. It looked so close, so warm that Lumi felt she could reach out and touch it. As she soared higher, the wind caressed her wings, filling her with an exhilaration she had never known. She wasn't just flying. She was free. Free from fear, free from doubt. Free from the belief that she was nothing more than darkness. Strange sensation bloomed in her heart. Joy, hope, and something else. Something she had never felt before. And then, in that very moment, a soft, warm glow began to surround her. It wasn't the light of the moon. It was her own light. When Lumi returned to the forest, she was not the same. The darkness no longer frightened her. For she had discovered that light and darkness were not enemies. They were part of each other. Without the night, the stars would not shine. Without her journey through the unknown, she would have never found her own glow. That night, when the other fireflies gathered by the lake, she didn't stay aside. Instead, she flew over the water and for the first time joined the dance. Her light wasn't the brightest, but it was warm and soft, like a comforting presence in the night. It didn't just illuminate the space around her. It lit up the hearts of those who looked at her. From that day on, Lumi never questioned why she was different. She knew that everyone has their own light. But it is only revealed when you stop being afraid of the darkness. I am Evelyn, and now I will take you on a magical journey into the classic fairy tale Hansel and Gretel. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to click the like button, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new tale. Now snuggle up, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Once upon a time, in a little village nestled on the edge of a vast, dark forest, there lived a poor woodcutter and his 2 children, Hansel and Gretel. Their mother had passed away when they were young, and they lived with their father and their cruel stepmother, who made their lives miserable. The woodcutter was a kind man, but he was poor, and with each passing day, life seemed to grow harder. The stepmother was not a kind woman. She never showed any love for the children, and she always complained about their presence, saying that they were a burden on the family. The children, however, still hoped that things would improve. They played together in the small garden, and in the evenings they would listen to their father's stories by the fireplace, where they tried to forget about their troubles. But deep inside, they knew their stepmother did not care for them. One cold, bitter evening, as snowflakes danced in the wind outside, the stepmother hatched a wicked plan. She told the woodcutter, "We cannot feed these children anymore. The forest has little food to offer, and the little we have should be for us, not for them. We must take them into the forest and leave them there. It is the only way." The woodcutter was horrified by her suggestion. He loved his children dearly and couldn't bear the thought of leaving them alone in the cold forest. But the stepmother was determined, and she persuaded him by reminding him that they could no longer survive like this. The two children could not sleep from hunger, and overheard what the stepmother said to their father. Gretel cried bitterly and said to Hansel, "It's over for us." "Be quiet, Gretel," Hansel replied. "Don't worry. I'll think of something." And as soon as the old ones fell asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door and sneaked outside. The moon was shining very brightly, and the white pebbles scattered in front of the house gleamed like little coins. Hansel bent down and filled his pockets with pebbles. Then he went back inside and said to Gretel, "Don't worry, dear sister, go to sleep, and don't worry about anything." And he himself climbed back into bed. At dawn, before sunrise, the woman came in and woke the two children. "Get up, lazy bones! We're going into the forest for firewood." Then she gave each a piece of bread and said, "This is for your lunch. If you eat it too early, you won't get anything else." Gretel hid the 2 pieces under her apron, because Hansel's pockets were full of pebbles. Then they all set off for the forest. As they walked a little way, Hansel stopped and looked back at the house. He did this several times. Finally, his father said, "Hansel, why do you keep stopping and looking back? Be careful. Look at your feet." "Oh, father," Hansel replied, "I'm looking at the little white kitten that climbed onto the roof to say goodbye to me." The woman said, "Fool, that's not your kitten, but the morning sun, which has already lit up the chimney." But Hansel didn't look at the kitten. Each time he pulled a shiny pebble out of his pocket and dropped it on the path. When they reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Come on, children, gather some firewood to make a fire, so you won't be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered twigs and piled them into a little mound. They lit the twigs, and a rather high flame flared up. The woman said, "Children, lie down here by the fire and rest. We'll go and cut some wood, and when we're done, we'll come to get you." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and by noon, each ate their piece of bread. Since they could hear the sound of axes, they thought their father was near. But it wasn't an axe. It was a branch that their father had tied to a dead tree so that the wind could swing and knock it. They sat there for a long time, and their eyes grew heavy with tiredness, and they both fell into a deep sleep. When they finally woke up, it was dark night. Gretel began to cry and said, "How will we get out of the forest now?" But Hansel comforted her. "Wait a little. The moon will rise soon, and then we'll easily find the way." And when the full moon rose, Hansel took his sister's hand and followed the trail of pebbles, which gleamed like freshly cut coins, showing the way. The children walked all night, and by dawn reached their father's house. They knocked on the door. The mother opened, and when she saw that Hansel and Gretel were standing outside, she said, "Bad children, why did you sleep so long in the forest?" But the father was happy because it had been very hard for him to leave them alone in the forest. It wasn't long before poverty pressed them again, and one night the children overheard the stepmother saying to their father, "We've eaten everything. We have half a loaf of bread left, and then our song will be sung. We must get rid of the children. We'll take them further into the forest so that they won't find their way back. There is no other way out for us." The father felt very sorry and said, "It would be better to share the last morsel with the children." But the woman didn't listen to him, scolded him, and reproached him. "Once you start dancing, you have to finish the dance." Since he had given in once, the father had to give in again this time. The children were still awake and overheard the conversation, and as soon as the parents fell asleep, Hansel got up, wanted to go outside and collect pebbles like last time. But the mother had locked the door, and Hansel couldn't go out. However, he comforted his sister and said, "Don't cry, Gretel, and sleep peacefully. I'll think of something." Early the next morning, the woman went to the children and made them get up. She gave them another piece of bread, but this time it was smaller than before. As they went to the forest, Hansel dropped the crumbs from the bread into his pocket. Then he started stopping frequently and dropping a crumb along the way. "Hansel, why do you keep stopping and looking back?" asked the father. "Just walk along the road. I'm looking at my little dove. It has landed on the roof to say goodbye to me." Hansel replied. "Fool," said the stepmother, "that's not your dove, but the morning sun that has already lit the chimney." But Hansel slowly dropped the crumbs along the path. The mother led the children even deeper into the forest, where their feet had never trod. They lit a large fire again, and she said to them, "Children, sit here, and if you're tired you can sleep a little. We'll go to cut wood, and when we're done, we'll come to get you." By noon, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, who had dropped his piece along the way. Then they fell asleep, and evening passed, but no one came to fetch the poor children. They woke up in the middle of the night, but Hansel comforted his sister. "Gretel, wait for the moon to rise. We'll see the crumbs I dropped. They'll show us the way home." The moon rose, and they went to look for the crumbs, but they couldn't find a single one because the thousands of birds that fly through the forest and over the fields had eaten them. Hansel said to Gretel, "We'll find the way somehow." But they didn't. They walked for hours, tired and hungry, until they stumbled upon an unexpected sight. A house that seemed to be made entirely out of candy. The roof was made of gingerbread. The walls were covered in colorful candies and the windows sparkled with sugar. The children couldn't believe their eyes. Starving and exhausted, they started nibbling on the sweet candy, their hunger taking over. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and out came a woman who seemed to be kind and gentle. She smiled at the children and said, "Oh, my dear children, you must be hungry and tired. Come inside. I will take care of you." The children, too hungry to think twice, eagerly followed her into the house. The woman's house was warm and cozy, but as they sat down to eat, something didn't feel quite right. The woman's smile was too wide, her eyes too cold. But Hansel and Gretel, being young, didn't know what to make of it. They were too tired to question anything. The woman led Hansel to a cage and locked him inside. "You will stay here until you get nice and plump," she said. "Then I will feast on you." Hansel, terrified, sat in the cage, but he didn't make a sound. He knew he had to think of a way to escape. The witch turned to Gretel. "And you, my dear, will cook and clean for me. I have lots of work for you to do." Gretel obeyed, but her heart was filled with fear. She worked day and night, doing everything the witch told her to do. But she never gave up hope. She knew that she had to save her brother. Days passed, and the witch grew more impatient with Hansel, as he hadn't grown fat enough. "You must eat more, Hansel," she would shout, bringing him delicious food. But Hansel was clever. He pretended to eat, but instead he secretly fed the food to a little mouse that had come to visit him in the cage. One day the witch told Gretel to check the oven. "See if it's hot enough for baking," she said. "I need to cook something special." Gretel, thinking quickly, realized the witch was going to cook her and Hansel. Instead of obeying, she said, "I don't know how to check the oven. Can you show me, please?" The witch, eager to get rid of Gretel, leaned over to show her how. In an instant, Gretel pushed the witch into the oven and slammed the door shut. The witch screamed, but her voice soon faded away. Gretel ran away from there, and the wicked witch burned, and Gretel rushed straight to Hansel, opened the cage, and shouted, "Hansel, we're saved! The old witch is dead!" Hansel flew out like a bird when the door of the cage was opened. How happy they were! How they embraced! How they jumped and kissed! And since there was nothing left to fear, they entered the witch's house, where every corner was filled with chests of pearls and precious stones. After hours of walking, they finally found their way home. Their father, who had been searching for them, greeted them with tears of joy. The stepmother was gone, and the children no longer had to fear her cruelty. With the treasure they had found, the family lived happily ever after. They were no longer poor, and their lives were filled with love and warmth. Hansel and Gretel had learned a valuable lesson. No matter how dark the world may seem, There is always a way to overcome the darkness with love, courage, and cleverness. Welcome to the Bedtime Stories channel. I'm Evelyn, and today we'll journey into a timeless fairy tale, The Wolf and the 7 Little Goats. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more classic tales. Now get comfortable, relax, and let the story take you on an adventure. Once upon a time, in a cozy little house nestled at the edge of a vast and enchanting forest, lived a loving mother goat and her 7 playful kids. Their home was warm and inviting, with wooden beams supporting the thatched roof, and the scent of fresh hay and wildflowers always lingering in the air. Mother Goat, like all mothers, loved her little goats very much. She protected them from all the wild animals in the forest. The mother goat was gentle yet wise, with soft white fur and kind, watchful eyes that shone with love for her little ones. The kids, full of energy and mischief, frolicked around the house, their tiny hooves clicking against the wooden floor as they played. One bright morning, the mother goat gathered her children around her before leaving for the forest to gather food. Her voice, always calm and soothing, became firm as she warned them. "Dear children, I must go to the forest. Be very careful while I am away. The wicked wolf is always lurking nearby. If he comes, do not open the door under any circumstances. He may try to trick you, but you will recognize him by his rough voice and his black paws." The little goats, despite their playful nature, were obedient and promised to be cautious. She kissed them one by one, her nose brushing against their soft fur, before stepping out into the morning light. The sun cast golden rays through the tall trees, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves as she made her way into the forest, unaware of the danger that lurked nearby. Not long after, a shadow moved between the trees. The wolf, a fearsome creature, with a thick matted coat of gray fur and piercing yellow eyes, had been watching the house from a distance. His long, sharp claws dug into the earth as he prowled closer, his mind scheming how to deceive the little goats. Then, licking his lips hungrily, he knocked on the door with his heavy paw. "Open up, dear children. Your mother has returned and brought something for each of you," he called in his deep, growling voice. The little goats instantly knew it was not their mother. "No, no, you are not our mother. She has a soft, gentle voice, but yours is rough and deep. You are the wicked wolf," they cried, pressing against each other in fear. The wolf growled in frustration and stormed off to a nearby shop. There he bought a large piece of chalk and swallowed it, hoping to soften his voice. Then he returned to the house, his stomach churning, and knocked again. "Open the door, dear children. Your mother has returned." This time his voice was higher and smoother, but as he rested his paw on the windowsill, the little goat saw his dark, menacing claws. "No, our mother has white feet, but yours are gray. You are the wicked wolf," they shouted. Now seething with rage, the wolf ran to the baker and snarled, "Smear my paws with dough so they become white." The baker, frightened by the glint of the wolf's sharp teeth, hesitated, but at last obeyed. With his paws covered in dough, the wolf then hurried to the miller. "Sprinkle white flour over my paws so they look just like a goat's," he ordered. The miller, trembling with fear, quickly dusted the wolf's paws until they were as pale as snow. Satisfied with his disguise, the wolf returned to the house and knocked a third time. "Open the door, dear children. Your mother has returned from the forest with gifts for you." His voice was gentle, and when the little goats peeked through the crack in the door, they saw white paws. Their doubt wavered, and believing it to be their mother, they unlatched the door. In a flash, the door burst open with a deafening crash. The wolf lunged inside, his golden eyes gleaming with triumph, as his lips curled into a wicked grin. A terrible growl filled the house, sending the terrified kids scattering in all directions. One dove under the table, another crawled beneath the bed, a third squeezed into the oven, one hid in the kitchen cupboard, another crept under the wash basin, yet another climbed inside a large chest, and the smallest, trembling with fear, slipped inside the tall grandfather clock. The wolf sniffed the air, his keen nose leading him to each trembling little goat. One by one he swallowed them whole, his stomach stretching grotesquely with each gulp. Only the smallest kid, hidden deep inside the clock, remained safe. With a belly full and a satisfied grunt, the wolf staggered out of the house and collapsed beneath an old oak tree in the meadow, where he soon fell into a deep, snoring sleep. When the mother goat returned, her heart sank at the sight of the broken door, the overturned furniture, and the eerie silence that filled the once lively home. Frantic, she called out for her children. Her voice, filled with sorrow and fear, echoed through the empty rooms. At last, a faint, quivering voice answered from inside the grandfather clock. The smallest kid crawled out, his eyes filled with tears, and sobbed as he told his mother what had happened. Determined to save her children, the mother goat followed the wolf's heavy snores until she found him stretched beneath the oak tree, his belly round and shifting slightly. She placed her ear close and heard faint movements within. Hope surged in her heart. With steady hands, she took a pair of sharp scissors and carefully cut open his stomach. To her immense relief, one by one, the little goats tumbled out, shaken but unharmed. They clung to their mother, their eyes wide with astonishment and joy. The mother goat, her heart burning with righteous anger, gathered heavy stones and filled the wolf's belly with them before sewing him back up. As the sun began to set, the wolf stirred, groaning. He felt an unbearable thirst and heaved himself to his feet. The weight in his belly making him sluggish, he staggered toward the well, lapping up water greedily. But as he leaned over the edge, the heavy stones pulled him forward. With a loud splash, he plunged into the deep water, never to be seen again. The little goats cheered, their voices ringing like bells in the twilight air. Their mother gathered them into a warm embrace, pressing them close, grateful that they were safe once more. From that day on, they never forgot the importance of caution and the wisdom of their mother's words. And so, in their cozy little house at the forest's edge, the mother goat and her 7 kids lived happily and safely ever after. The end.
I am Lily, and now I will take you on a magical journey into the original fairy tale, The Secret of the Coral Reef. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to click the like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new tale. Now snuggle up, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Little Laura lived in a sunny coastal village where the sea was not only beautiful, but also a mystery. She loved to watch it from afar, but every time she tried to enter the water, her heart would start racing. She felt as though the waves were watching her like a giant, powerful monster, ready to swallow her at any moment. Laura wasn't ready to face that fear. One sunny day, while playing on the beach and collecting seashells, she found something unusual, a small stone that glowed with a soft blue light. The stone was very beautiful, and when she picked it up, it seemed like the sea whispered to her, "Take me and uncover my secret." Laura felt that she had to keep it, but she also felt a little uneasy, unsure of what would happen next. She looked at it one more time and then hid it in her pocket, trying not to pay it too much attention. The next day, when Laura was once again walking along the beach, the sea started whispering her name. She couldn't stop. The feeling was magical, yet mysterious. The waves greeted her with every movement, and the blue light from the stone grew stronger as she approached the water. Laura stopped, listening to the whispers of the sea, which seemed to be calling her. In the distance, she saw a faint outline of a boat, but it was too far to see clearly. Laura felt her heart racing, but this time not from fear, but from some new, unexplained excitement. "What is this?" Laura whispered, looking at the stone in her hand. It began to glow more brightly, as if something was calling her. Then, the waves broke in golden droplets around her feet, and Laura felt the soft sea foam wrap around her legs. The stone began pulsing in her hand, and she felt something shift inside her. Suddenly, the waves seemed to look at her with strange curiosity. "Don't be afraid, Laura," a voice suddenly called out. She turned her head and saw a huge turtle swimming toward her. The turtle was so big that it seemed to beat with every stroke of its flippers. "I will help you," said the turtle, smiling warmly. "What should I do?" Laura asked, still confused by what was happening. Her heart was beating loudly, but not out of fear, out of some newfound curiosity. The sea is not an enemy, it is an ally. The turtle came closer and spoke calmly. "You just need to trust it. Swimming is easy when you trust the water." Laura still felt unsure. "But I don't know how to swim. How will I breathe underwater?" she asked, turning to the blue sea. "This is part of the sea's secret," the turtle replied. "You will also receive help from the old whale who lives deep in the sea." The turtle swam calmly toward Laura and pointed with its flipper to somewhere in the distance. Laura looked and soon saw a massive whale emerge from the depths of the sea. It was so vast that its head rose above the water, as if speaking to her. When the whale approached, It offered her a small stone, identical to the one Laura had found on the beach. "This stone will help you breathe underwater," said the whale in a soft, soothing voice. "Don't be afraid, Laura. Take it and you will understand how to overcome any obstacle." Laura took the stone, which was cold to the touch, but began to glow with a strong light in her hand. She felt her entire body fill with calm. Suddenly, something changed. She could breathe underwater without fear. "You will be safe as long as you move with the sea," said the whale, smiling gently at Laura. "This is your path. Follow the light." Laura dipped her feet into the sea and then submerged completely, letting the waves guide her. She felt light and free, as if she were part of the flow of the water. With every movement, she felt everything around her becoming clearer. The water felt warm and soft, and the light from the stone led her to new wonders. When Laura reached the coral reef, she couldn't believe her eyes. Marine creatures greeted her. Colorful fish danced around her. Seahorses twisted their bodies, and glowing jellyfish floated in perfect rhythm. Seaweed, like soft hands, guided her through a labyrinth of underwater caves and chambers. Laura felt as though she were part of this world. As she swam in the crystal clear waters, she noticed something that amazed her even more. A group of tiny fish were dancing around her as if welcoming her. They sang softly, synchronizing with every movement Laura made. "You are chosen, Laura. You are now part of our world," they sang. Laura smiled and continued swimming, discovering even more incredible things. Huge, sparkling corals that seemed to live their own lives. They changed color depending on the water's movement and the light. Laura wondered if these corals could speak, but there was no time to think, for another wonder awaited her. As she moved along the reef's paths, Laura suddenly felt something strange. A radiant light began to shine from below. She dove deeper and discovered something that truly amazed her. Before her appeared a massive figure made of pure light. It was the sea spirit, a grand and majestic creature with the body of a fish and a human face. "I am the spirit of the sea," it said in a voice that echoed through the very heart of the ocean. "Are you guiding me here?" Laura asked, feeling a mix of fear and awe. "I am not guiding you, Laura. You chose this path yourself, but if you wish, I will reveal another secret of the sea." The spirit paused for a moment and then continued. "This secret is that the sea is not just water. It is part of the life of everything around us. You must care for it, love it, and understand it." "How do I protect it?" Laura asked, feeling her heart fill with a new responsibility. Just as you care for yourself, you must care for the sea. Every reef, every fish, every drop of water is precious. We are part of this world. When you fill yourself with love for it, you will understand how to be a true guardian. Laura felt inspired and blessed. She knew she would never forget this moment. The sea was not only its home, but also her destiny. When she surfaced, Laura was no longer the same girl. She had changed, strong and calm. The stone in her hand no longer glowed so brightly, but Laura could feel the light inside her was stronger than ever. "Thank you, sea," she whispered. "I will guard your secrets." She turned toward the horizon, feeling that new adventures were waiting. With a brave heart, Laura now knew how to care for her new underwater family. And although the light of the stone had dimmed, she knew it would be with her whenever she needed help again.